Question. According to the United Nations, which country has the worst humanitarian crisis today? The answer at present is Yemen, and Sanaa is its capital.
The decade began with a surge of optimism. Millions of Yemenis took to the streets in 2011 to oust an unpopular president. But Yemen was not to be a success story of the Arab Spring. Instead, the country was consumed by a bloody civil war, exacerbated and sustained by foreign intervention that has brought some 20 million Yemenis to the brink of starvation.
Sanaa could also be today's most immediate example of proxy rule. In their political maneuverings, weaker countries have always had to contend with outside interests that can sometimes be overbearing yet helpful from time to time. And Yemen's recent administrative background is peppered with foreign players. Yemen's rulers have included the Ottomans, then the British, then the Americans and the Soviet Union, and now it's the Iranians, Saudis, and Emiratis running things by proxy. So it's really been an anxiety-filled life for most Yemenis. Except for a brief period in 1990 when the presidents of North and South Yemen united the countries and briefly made an attempt to govern Yemen directly after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Historically, though, ancient Yemen was self-governed, in high standing, and is looked at by some scholars as the cradle of Pan-Arabism. Modern Yemen, however, is really something else. Barely enjoying a decade of stable government since the end of World War II. Even then, today's Yemeni government, if you can call it that, is probably in the worst state of affairs when compared to the other administrations. It's just unbridled lawlessness, even when you consider the previous lows of the country. Now, Yemen's problems today started some 5,000 kilometers away in 2010 with the Arab Spring.
And everyone's eyes were peeled and watching. I remember his funeral procession that turned into a protest where people were gathered for him. It started with family and friends, but then people, rallied together as they heard why and what happened and the aftermath.
On December 17, 2010, Mohammed Bouazizi, a Tunisian street vendor, set himself on fire outside a government building. It was an act of despair to protest government corruption and mass unemployment in Tunisia. His act would be a catalyst that would spark a nationwide revolution, toppling Tunisian President Zain al-Abidine Ben Ali, and ignite mass protests across the Middle East and North Africa that would later be known as the Arab Spring.
What started as a Tunisian street vendor's quarrel with a municipal official over a rental fee has morphed into a billion-dollar war with missiles, jets, battleships, tanks, and, most regrettably, the irreparable loss of life. And that's just Yemen we're talking about. The effects of the Arab Spring are still ongoing in many other North African and Middle Eastern countries. And the situation just keeps deteriorating. Internal disputes have long been an unwanted reputation for the Middle East. Yemen was already in a civil war in 2023 when some rebel groups decided to escalate matters by attacking foreign ships that were passing through the Red Sea. This was done as a show of solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza by Yemen's Houthi rebels after Israel retaliated to the October 7th attacks by Hamas. Major shipping companies have now begun to increasingly take their vessels around southern Africa instead of using the shorter but risky Suez Canal, adding at least 10 days to their journey and millions to their bills. As a result of these maritime attacks, activities in Yemen have escalated from proxy battles to direct military confrontation by foreign governments with the Yemenis. It's proving to be a showdown of a growing number of players with Russia, China, Italy, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Kuwait, Morocco, Senegal, Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Bahrain, America, Britain, France, the Emirates, and Israel already having been in the mix with varying degrees. And the more these interventions continue, the more it will lead to a show of might by the global powers. Just remember, this started with a street vendor's argument in Tunisia. And look where we are today. Even without visiting the city of Sanaa, you can see that this town is really old and, at least until the most recent civil war started, was well preserved.
The Yemeni capital's old city is the latest area to be targeted in the battle between Houthi rebels and pro-government forces.
Though modern Yemen is just 34 years old, the city of Sanaa is ancient. Modern Yemen is the product of the unification of Islamic northern Yemen and communist southern Yemen. Prior to the unification, northern Yemen was ruled by President Ali Abdullah Saleh and southern Yemen was under President Ali Salim al-Baid. Although both countries weren't exactly prosperous, northern Yemen was considered to be on the greener side of the fence, as southern Yemen favored the Soviet Union system, which by 1990 had failed. And so it would be President Saleh from North Yemen that would become the first president of Yemen, with Ali Salim al-Baid, the president of South Yemen, becoming the first vice president of Yemen. However, by 1994, the country's euphoria had worn out as subsequent divisions became ever more apparent. A civil war started in southern Yemen against separatists, followed by a northern rebellion with religious diehards from the Shiite sect of Islam moving against the central government.
The modern Republic of Yemen was cobbled together in 1990 when the independent countries of North Yemen and South Yemen agreed to merge. From the outset, their union was marred by resentment and misunderstanding.
Just see the merger of the North and the South. That was the dream of many people. But the devil is in the detail. And once that merger happened, the integration was not fully complete.
Both parties went into the unification with the expectation that they would be able to be the dominant force within a unified Yemen. Just a few years later, the South, having rethought the whole thing, tried to leave again, and that led to the Civil War in 1994.
Only 4 days old, Yemen's civil war is ripping apart the impoverished country. Northern army units knocked out this southern artillery brigade in a fierce battle during the night. They took a large number of southern prisoners.
While civil war erupted in the southern part of Yemen, a religious revival swept through the Shiite communities in the rugged countryside of northern Yemen. Led by the Houthi family, the movement attracted those who resented the authoritarian power of the country's president, Ali Abdullah Saleh.
The Houthi movement is a northern-based movement. It's part of the Zaydi, which is a branch of the Shiite group. Some people in the north, some members of the Houthi community who feel marginalized, feel like their parts of the country have been underserved by the central government. And so there's a sectarian layer, there's a local layer, and a political layer.
These divisions persisted for the next 2 decades until the leaders' days of reckoning that started with the Arab Spring, showing the Yemenis' dissatisfaction with both leaders' decision-making. Looking ahead, it's difficult to map or forecast where things are going with this civil war. Already there are differences within the Emiratis and the Saudis. There are suspicions that the Emiratis want to split and return to a South and North Yemen, which the Saudis oppose. We saw how Israel's war in Gaza brought in Europe, Africa, Asia, and America into this war. Who knows where the next butterfly effect will put Yemen? No prizes for guessing what this has done so far for Sanaa''s peace ratings.
Mohammed bin Salman, when he took on this adventure into Yemen, thought that the fight would be quicker, that they could come to a truce sooner, and that the Houthis would come to the table. It's clear that that calculation has not borne out.
In response to the Saudi intervention, Iran ramped up its support for the Houthis, transforming a domestic conflict into an international proxy war.
The day Saudi attacked the Houthis to remove them from power, they approached Iran. Therefore, the Saudis pushed Houthis to Tehran. It was not Iranian decision or choice.
It is more than anything else, in my estimation, a marriage of convenience in which the Houthis really, frankly, do not care that much about the Iranians. But the support of the Iranians to the Houthis is something that is welcomed, mindful of the fact that the other factions in that civil war have the support of the Saudi government, the UAE government, the US government, the French government, the British government, and many other governments.
Recently, some observers have noticed cracks in the alliance between the Saudis and their main partner in Yemen, the United Arab Emirates.
People previously assumed that even though there might have been some differences, the Saudis and the Emiratis were basically on the same side. Increasingly, it's become clear that they're not always on the same side. And one example of that is the Southern Transitional Council, the STC, which is a secessionist movement in the south of Yemen. The UAE has supported them against the wishes of the Saudis.
Fighting between the central government and southern secessionists has opened a new front in an already Byzantine civil war.
There are a lot of tensions within Yemen between the different groups, between the north and south, and it was really visible in August 2019 when the Southern Transitional Council basically kicked the Hadi government officials out of Aden.
President Hadi and its government, they have almost 100,000 troops been building in Ma'rib, and we saw these groups coming to attack south in Shabu and Abiyan. Instead of attacking al-Houthi, they are coming to attack us in the south.
The Yemen war, it's a war, wars within wars within wars. And one of the wars is the war in the south between the STC, the Southern Separatists, and the internationally recognized government, which is backed by the Saudis. Those internal struggles are distracting from what everyone says is their main ambition, which is to fight against terrorism.